Good evening, and welcome to Nox Historia. Tonight, we travel to the world of Abbasid, Baghdad. But before we go anywhere at all, let yourself arrive here first. The day you have just lived is finished with you. It does not need anything more from you tonight. So set it down, and set it down untidily, without sorting it into what went well and what did not. Put it by the door, the way you would put down a bag, and leave it there until morning. Feel the surface underneath you taking your weight. Notice that it is doing all of the work, and that you can stop helping it. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been sitting since this morning. Let the jaw loosen. Let the hands grow heavy and warm and a little clumsy, the fingers opening on their own. Now, breathe in slowly through the nose and let it go without counting it. And once more, a little slower, so that the breath out lasts longer than the breath in. That is the whole of it. Nothing else is asked of you. The room is going soft at the edges. The small sounds of your own house are further off now and less interesting. You are loosening your hold on this evening so that we can slip quietly out of it into another one, a very long way from here. And we are going somewhere hot and flat and green with palms, on a wide, slow river in the middle of what we now call Iraq. This is Baghdad, and the year is somewhere close to 850 of the Common Era. The city is young, younger at this moment than most of the buildings in any European capital today. It was laid out on bare ground in the year 762 by the caliph al-Mansur, who named it Madinat al-Salam, the city of peace, and who built its heart as a perfect circle, walls inside walls, 4 great gates, and 4 straight roads running inward like the spokes of a wheel. And here is something most people never learn. That circle is gone, not ruined, not half-standing, not fenced off for visitors, gone entirely somewhere beneath the modern city, and nobody has ever dug up one certain brick of it. Everything we know about the most spectacular city of its century we know from words, from a book of geography by a traveler called al-Yaqubi, from a history of Baghdad compiled generations later by al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, from letters, inventories, contracts, recipes. The greatest round city in the world survives because people wrote it down, and for no other reason at all. You do not need to remember any of this. If you happen to fall asleep, that is exactly what this is for. So let us go. Let us come at it the way a traveler would in the last hour of the light. You are on the road from the north, and you have been walking since the middle of the afternoon, and the heat is finally beginning to let go of the ground. Date palms stand along the roadside in long, ragged lines, their shadows stretched out sideways across the dust. Irrigation channels run beside the fields, cut and recut by hand centuries, and the barley and the melons and the little walled gardens come right up to the edge of the road. Somewhere out in the green, a man is calling to an ox, unhurried, the way you speak to an animal you have known for years. Then the city begins to show itself, not walls first, but smoke,
a thin blue haze from 10,000 cooking fires lying flat and low across the plain. Then the domes. Then the river, wide and brown and slow, with boats moored all along it, and mud-brick houses crowding down to the bank. This is the Tigris, and Baghdad sits astride it, half on one side and half on the other, joined by bridges made of boats. Pontoons, roped together and planked over, swinging open when something large needs to pass. Some of the little craft down there are perfectly round, woven from reeds and sealed with pitch, turning gently as they drift. People were still building round boats exactly like those on this same river within living memory. There are photographs.
The guards are leaning on the stone, and they do not stop you. The last of the day's traffic is a trickle now. A boy driving 3 goats, a man with a bundle balanced on his head, 2 women walking home with their hands full. You go under the arch, and the city closes over you. Inside, the lanes are narrow and the houses are tall, 3 and 4 stories of brick, so that the ground below them keeps its cool an hour longer than the fields do. Wooden lattice screens the upper windows. Where a lane is wide enough, someone has slung matting across from roof to roof, and it is still lifting a little in the last of the warm air. This is, at this moment, very probably the largest city on Earth. Historians argue about the figure, and the honest answer is that nobody counted. But estimates run into the hundreds of thousands, and for the century that follows, some put it near 800,000. Arabic and Persian and Syriac and Greek, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, all of them living in the same warren of streets. You will hear 4 languages in 100 paces, and not one of them belongs to you. It does not matter in the least. Nobody here needs anything from you tonight. Follow the smell of charcoal and cardamom, and you come out into the markets. They are laid out by trade, each craft with its own street, and they are enormous. The old story says that al-Mansur pushed the merchants out of his round city early on, down into the quarter called Kark by the river, on the reasoning that a ruler should not have strangers wandering under his windows all day. So the trade sprawls south along the water instead, street after street of it. It is closing time, shutters coming down, awnings unhooked and rolled. A trader counting the day's coins into a cloth, licking his thumb, losing his place, starting again. What came through here today? Pepper and cinnamon out of India, silk and porcelain and paper out of China, ivory and gold up from Africa, furs and honey and wax down from the cold forests of the north. And silver coins minted here in Baghdad have been dug out of the ground in Sweden, in Russia, in Britain. Thousands upon thousands of them. Every one was carried there in somebody's hand. Turn the corner and the smell changes. Glue, leather, ink, wet rag drying in the warm air. This is the street of the warraqin, the papermen, who make the paper and copy the books and sell them. The craft came west out of China through Samarkand, and there was a paper mill working in this city before the year 800. The difference is hard to overstate. Parchment is skin, expensive, and a book made of it is a treasure kept in a chest. Paper is boiled rag, cheap, and a book made of it is something an ordinary scholar can own 100 of. The government offices took to it early for a pleasingly suspicious reason. Parchment can be scraped clean and quietly rewritten. Paper cannot. What is written on paper stays written. One man who kept a shop on a street like this, a bookseller named Ibn al-Nadim, sat down about a century after our night and wrote out a catalogue of every book he knew to exist in Arabic. It survives. It is how we know the titles of thousands of books that no longer exist anywhere on earth. A door stands open in a blank wall, and we go in. From the street, a Baghdadi house tells you nothing. No windows below, no ornament, plaster and a plain wooden door. The house faces inward onto its own courtyard, and the courtyard is where the family lives. A fig tree in this one, a lemon, pots of basil and mint against the wall. A shaft in the corner draws cool night air down into a low room, half sunk beneath the ground, where the household hides in the worst of the summer afternoons. The whole building is a machine for handling heat, designed by nobody in particular, refined over centuries by people who wanted to sleep. Inside, the lamps are lit one by one.
They are small, most of them. Pinched clay with a wick of twisted cotton floating in sesame oil, and each one throws a circle of light about the size of a dinner plate. The light is not white, and it is not steady. It leans and recovers, and the shadows on the plaster lean with it. Faces look kinder by it. Everyone's eyes look tired and forgiving. This is what evening was for almost all of human history, and there is something in you that still recognizes it and wants to slow down. A cloth goes down on the floor, and the family gathers around it. We know what they ate, and we know it in extraordinary detail, because a man called Ibn Sayyar al-Warraq compiled a cookbook of more than 600 recipes in 132 chapters, drawn from the kitchens of this court and this century. It is the oldest cookbook in Arabic that survives, and it reads like a real kitchen, arguments about vinegar, notes on what to do when it goes wrong. So there is flatbread baked against the wall of a clay oven that morning, aubergine, which is fashionable and new and faintly suspect, rice, almonds, a stew called sikbaj, meat cooked long and slow and sharpened with vinegar, which was a favorite of caliphs and is the ancestor by a very long road through Spain of the dish the world now calls escabeche. Someone brings a basin and an ewer, and everyone washes their hands before eating and again after in water scented with rose water. Nobody thinks of that as a luxury. It is how you eat. There is a lamp burning late in an upper room. Somebody is working, and it is worth going up to see, because this is the thing this city is remembered for. He is translating, and the language he is turning into Arabic is Greek. The greatest of them is alive tonight, in his 40s, in this city. His name is Hunayn ibn Ishaq. He is a Christian, from a family of the Church of the East, born near Kufa to an apothecary, and learned Greek well enough to argue about it. He translated Galen, Hippocrates, Plato, Aristotle, sometimes into Syriac first and then into Arabic, sometimes straight across. And we are not guessing about how he worked, because he told us. He wrote a letter to his patron, listing the works of Galen one after another, and for each one he set down who had translated it, into which language, for whom, and whether the Greek copy he had been given was any good. In it he describes hunting for a particular book and finding only half of it in Damascus. It is the most human document imaginable, a working translator complaining gently about his sources. Here is the part that should make you sit up and then lie down again. A good number of Galen's books do not exist in Greek anymore. The originals are lost. They come to us only through Hunayn's Arabic. A man in this room, on this night, by this lamp, is the only reason we still have them. And now we should be gentle with the story, because the version most of us were told is not quite right.
You will have heard of the House of Wisdom, a vast academy, faculties and departments, a domed reading hall, an observatory on the roof, teams of scholars working in shifts. Modern historians have gone back through the Arabic sources, and the picture does not hold. The phrase appears far more rarely than you would expect. What it most likely described was a library, a working bookstore attached to the caliph's palace, with a staff who copied and kept and fetched. There are whole books now on the gap between legend and evidence.
But the real thing was larger than the myth, not smaller. The translation of Greek and Persian and Indian learning into Arabic went on for 200 years, and it never depended on one building at all. It was paid for by dozens of people. Caliphs, yes, but also bankers, generals, court physicians, minor officials, whole families who made it their business across 3 generations. A rich man commissioned a translation the way a rich man elsewhere commissioned a chapel. It was not an institution, it was a fashion, and then a habit, and then simply what educated people did. And that is far harder to build and far harder to destroy. Look at what is lying about on the tables in rooms like this one. There is a book on solving equations, written here about 30 years ago by a scholar from Khwarazm, out east beyond the Oxus. Its title contains the word al-Jabr, the restoring, the setting of a broken bone. We call the subject algebra because of that title. The same man wrote a second book explaining the Indian way of counting with 9 figures and a 0, and the Arabic original of it is lost. It survives only in a Latin translation made 300 years later in Europe, which opens with his name, mangled into Latin, as algorithmi. So every time somebody in your century says the word algorithm, they are mispronouncing a place name in Central Asia and have been for 800 years. There is a treatise being written in this decade, in this city, by a philosopher called Al-Kindi on how to read a secret message when you do not have the key. Count the letters, he says, and compare how often each one turns up against how often it turns up in ordinary writing, and the code falls open. It is the first description of that method anywhere in the world. Then it was lost for 1,000 years and surfaced in an archive in Istanbul in the 20th century, which is worth remembering. Knowledge does not always travel in a straight line. And there is a book of 100 machines written by 3 brothers, the sons of Musa, who spent their lives and their considerable money on such things: trick jugs, fountains that change their pattern, a lamp that trims its own wick and feeds itself oil so that it burns all night without anyone getting up. Downstairs, the last small tasks of the day are being finished. A porous clay jar sits in a window, sweating gently, keeping the drinking water cool by doing nothing but standing there. A child is being told for the 3rd time to go and lie down. Someone sweeps a courtyard that doesn't really need sweeping, because sweeping it is how the day is ended. A grandmother says something dry, and 2 people laugh, and one of them is still laughing about it a minute later. You do not need the language. Every household on earth has had this hour. And then the mattresses are carried up onto the roof. That is how you sleep here in the summer, and how people slept here until quite recently. The whole city bedding down on its own rooftops, story after story of families lying out under the open sky, close enough to hear one another turn over. The brick under you is still giving back the day's heat. The air moving off the river is cooler than the air in the house. Below, the lanes have gone quiet, and the only sound is a dog somewhere and somebody's shutter,
and then nothing. Look up. The sky over Baghdad in the 9th century has nothing competing with it, and the stars are not scattered, they are crowded. And here is a small thing that might stay with you. Most of the bright ones have Arabic names, and we still use them. Altair, the flying one. Deneb, the tail. Aldebaran, the follower, who comes behind the Pleiades and never catches them. Rigel, the foot. Betelgeuse, so garbled on its way into English that scholars still argue about the original. When you look up in your century and name a star, you are borrowing a word from people lying on a roof like this one.
They were not merely admiring it either. A generation before this night, the caliph al-Mamun sent 2 parties of surveyors out onto the flat plain of Sinjar, one walking north and one walking south, measuring as they went, until the pole star had shifted by a single degree. Then they walked back toward each other, checking. From that one patient walk, they worked out the size of the earth, and they came remarkably close. How close exactly, nobody can say, because we are no longer certain how long their mile was, which is its own kind of poetry. They measured the world accurately, and we lost the ruler. One last thing before we let go of the roof. Around 40 years before tonight, a caliph died in this city named Harun al-Rashid, and he had already begun to turn into something else, into a character, into the caliph who walked his own city at night in ordinary clothes, unrecognized, to hear what his people said when they thought nobody was listening. He goes on doing that in the 1001 Nights, in stories told and retold and written down and added to over the following centuries, until the Baghdad of the tales is not this Baghdad at all, but a dream version of it, with the real streets softened out. The oldest scrap we have of those stories is a single page of paper with the opening lines and a title, and a note jotted on the back that dates it to roughly this century. A page of Baghdad paper from the age of the papermakers, carrying the first known words of the most retold story in the world. That is a good thing to carry down with you. A city that wrote everything down so thoroughly that it survived the loss of its own stones. The books went out from here into Spain and Sicily, and eventually into the Latin schools of Europe, and the words traveled with them: algebra, algorithm, alcohol, cotton, lemon, sugar. You have used several of them this week without noticing, which is the fate any translator would want. So let the roof hold you. Somewhere below, a lamp is trimming its own wick and burning quietly on, and a man is asleep over a half-finished page of Galen, and the great slow river is going by in the dark with nobody watching it. The palms stand still. The city sleeps on its rooftops under those crowded stars 1100 years ago, as you, perhaps, are sleeping now. So let go of the last of it, whatever you are still holding. Let the lamp burn low. Let the page lie unfinished until morning. Let the round city keep its shape in the dark, where nobody has to find it. Sleep well, and when you are ready to travel again, Nox Historia will be waiting. Good night.